Hi, my name is Jennifer. Welcome to Jennifer Loves Books. Thank you for joining me today. I thought I would talk about all the books that I read in January. So during January, and also during, I think, December as well, I've been doing the Read What You Own challenge, created by Fuminori. I'll link Ollie's channel down below. So for this challenge, I have pledged to read 25 books from my own bookshelves before buying any more books or getting any more books out of the library. So all but one of the books in this video are books towards that challenge. And at the end of the video, I'll do a little update on how I am getting on. So we'll talk about these books from least favourite to most favourite. We will start off with some DNFs. So the first DNF I don't have anymore because it's a library book. I read it for my library book club. That is my exception to my Read What You Own challenge. And that book was Bridget Jones' Mad About the Boy. So this is the third book in the Bridget Jones series. I haven't read the first two. I have seen the first two films. I'm not a fan of Bridget Jones, really. But the specific reason why I DNF'd this book was because of the constant references to weight, which I just don't want to read about. So that was my first DNF. On to the ones that I actually own. A Dark Adapted Eye by Barbara Vine, aka Ruth Rendell. This is a sort of a psychological thriller, I think. I'm right in saying it's one of her best known ones under Barbara Vine. I just struggled to get into it, really. That's the reason I DNF that one. Then something quite unusual for me. This is A Patchwork Family by Cathy, Bramley. I think I acquired this book a couple of years ago in a random Etsy box. The reason I thought I would pick this up was because I was in the mood for something light-hearted, but I quickly decided it was not for me. The next DNF is quite controversial. It's quite a popular book. A number of booktubers, it's probably one of their favourite books. And I'm sure it's a good book, but I just didn't get on with the writing style at all. So I'm sorry, but I DNF'd Saltwater by Jessica Andrews. I know, I'm sorry. I just didn't get on with the writing style. It's told in these very short sections which are numbered. And for that reason I just struggled to engage with it or to connect with it really in any way. I am definitely, I think, an outlier on this one because I've not heard anyone else say anything negative about it, but I just struggled to get on with it. And then the next DNF is another fairly surprising one, maybe. It's Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier. So I have actually read Jamaica Inn before, a long time ago. I read a lot of Daphne du Maurier as a teenager, and I would say she is one of my favourite authors. However, Jamaica Inn was never one of my favourite books of hers that I have read. The reason I decided to revisit it recently was partly because I recently acquired a copy. I acquired a few second-hand copies of Daphne du Maurier novels, so I thought maybe I should give it another go. But also the FOMO book club, hosted by Alice and the Giant Bookshelf, Gem of Books and Jack from Spread Bookjoy. I'll link their channels down below. FOMO book club was reading this for January and February, so I thought perfect time to pick it up. Yeah, I just struggle to get into it. I find this slightly dull. I hate to say it. And I think it's partly because it's more of an action novel, I would say. More of an action-y mystery thriller, whereas something like Rebecca or My Cousin Rachel, I think, is more of a psychological thriller. And then another reason, which only occurred to me after having DNF'd it, and I wonder how much of a part this plays in it, is the fact that this is told in third person, whereas Rebecca, My Cousin Rachel, and the scapegoat, so my cousin Rachel and the scapegoat are my two favourite du Mauriers, are all told in first person, and I do wonder if that maybe has something to do with it as well, why I sort of struggle to connect with the main character or become engaged at all with it. A lot of people love this. It's just not one of my favourites. This one doesn't count towards the Read What You Own challenge, so these DNFs do because I'm going to be getting rid of them. This one doesn't because I am actually going to keep a hold of it because like it matches my other Daphne du Mauriers. On to the books that I did actually get to the end of. So starting with my least favourite of those is The Rorschach Texts by Stephen Hall. So this is a thriller, mystery. It's quite high concept. A man wakes up one day and doesn't know who he is, where he is. He finds a note. He's in like I don't know if he's in a hotel room or in a house. But he finds a note telling him to ring this number, speak to this doctor and make an appointment to go see her, which he does. And this doctor explains to him that he has some form of amnesia, memory loss thing, whereby every so often, and I think it can be years apart, he will lose his memory. And then he starts receiving these letters which are written by the past him, so like telling him about stuff that he has since forgotten. Then we have this conceptual shark, which is not a real shark. I struggled to kind of understand what was going on a little bit. Like, I feel like this could have been a really good book for me, but it just missed the mark for me. Possibly because I thought it was maybe trying too hard to be clever. I got to the end of it because I was interested to see where it was going to go. I will say the ending I thought was kind of quite interesting, but overall this is not a book for me, and I will be getting rid of this. Next, one which I enjoyed slightly more but still wasn't really a fan of is The Bellwether Revivals by Benjamin Wood. This is dark academia set in Cambridge. Our main character, don't know what his name is not a student, but he works in a care home, and he befriends a group of Cambridge University students. And one of this group of students believes that he can physically heal people through music, and he conducts these increasingly outlandish experiments to sort of prove his power. So there's lots of sort of philosophising and that sort of thing. There's an interesting hook at the start of the book in the prologue because we know that two people are dead. We don't know who those people are and we don't know how they died. And that hook was really what kept me reading till the end. If it wasn't for that, I possibly would have DNF'd it. Yeah, it didn't really work for me. It fell back on some quite cliched tropes, I would say. I'm not sure that I'm a fan of dark academia because I didn't really like Secret History either. So I'm not sure how much that has something to do with it, but this one just didn't really do it for me. Okay, the remaining books I all enjoyed to varying degrees. Next we have The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So this is a YA mystery. Our main character, called Avery, is a young woman who all of a sudden finds that she has inherited a lot of money. So this old man has died, who she has never met before, and left her all his inheritance. She has no idea why. So part of the deal is that she has to go and live for a year in his what was his home, some like mansion castle thing, with his family. And his family obviously do not trust Avery because they're like, why has our granddad left you all his money? So there are some mystery elements. It's described sort of in comparison to the Da Vinci Code. There are some sort of like puzzle type elements, so I can see why that comparison is made. I thought that those elements were fairly basic. Not necessarily that I knew the solutions, but that they weren't terribly intriguing. But, I found it quite an enjoyable, quite an entertaining read. This is the first in a series. I'm probably not going to continue on with the series because I didn't like it that much and I'm not really a big series reader, but this was, fairly enjoyable. Next, we actually have some non-fiction for a change. I know I read one piece of non-fiction last year, so I have equalled that record as of today. This is Why I Write by George Orwell. So this is a collection of 3 essays and 1 short story. My favourite essay was called The Lion and the Unicorn, and it was written by George Orwell during World War II, which I thought was really interesting because obviously it's very political, this is George Orwell, but it was interesting to hear his perspective from writing while the war was going on. I thought that was really interesting. One of the other essays is about sort of language and politics and language. I do like George Orwell. 1984 is one of my favourite books, so this was quite an enjoyable little read. Next we have some classic murder mystery. This is Murder in the Basement by Anthony Berkeley, who's one of my favourite Golden Age authors. In this book we have a young married couple who move into a new house and they find buried in their basement a dead body. And then a fair chunk of the book is taken up with the police trying to, excuse me, work out who this person is, and, how they died, how they ended up in this house. It was quite an enjoyable little murder mystery. Next we have My Annihilation by Fuminori Nakamura, which is translated from the Japanese by Sam Bett. This is a mystery thriller that I really enjoyed. So the book opens up with a man in a hotel room who has all these documents with him because he's seemingly, for some reason, wanting to assume a new identity. There is a suitcase in the room and he thinks, although he's not sure, that there is a dead body in that suitcase. And in the room there is also a manuscript which he starts to read. This book is described as a puzzle box, and I would say that is correct. What we have is various sort of narrative layers as we go through the story of sort of perspective changes and things that become revealed as we go through the book. It sort of plays with your mind a little bit, and it's kind of difficult to talk about, but I thought it was very, very enjoyable. Next we have a rom-com, Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. So this is about Luke, who is sort of kind of famous, living a bit of a rock and roll lifestyle, wants to clean up his image, and he starts fake dating Oliver, who is a barrister, sort of quite posh. So we have an opposites attract fake dating trope going on here. I really like this. I thought it was very funny. I liked the humour in here, and it was also quite sweet in parts as well. My only quibble, it was maybe a little bit too long because it's like 400 pages, which just feels like a little bit too long. But I really liked it. It was a very enjoyable read. This is the first in a series. I wouldn't necessarily hunt out the next book in the series, but if I happened to see it in a charity shop, I definitely would pick it up. Okay, now we're on to my favourite 2 books of January. Sula by Toni Morrison. So this really surprised me actually, and it wasn't what I was expecting. My only experience reading Toni Morrison before is reading about half of Beloved, which I did DNF because I was getting a bit confused by it. But I fully intend one day to head back to Beloved, but my plan is to read more Toni Morrison first. So we have 2 best friends, Sula and Nell, who grow up together, and then Sula decides to leave town, moves to the city, has quite a different life to Nell until they then sort of reconnect in later years. There are some quite shocking moments in here, But I feel like sort of like a different shocking to what you get in Beloved. The characters in here I thought really, really interesting. There's a lot of nuance. It just didn't like go where I expected. And it's quite a short book as well. I think it's less than 200 pages. It's a book that I think I would like to reread in future, and I feel like I'd probably get more out of it on a reread as well. So it's definitely made me keen to pick up more by Toni Morrison. And then my favourite book that I read in January was Salt Slow by Julia Armfield. This is a short story collection. Julia Armfield is the author of Our Wives Under the Sea, which is one of my favourite books of last year. This was published before Our Wives Under the Sea. And I love this. This was just brilliant. So having read Our Wives Under the Sea, in this collection you can see sort of some of the sort of ideas that feed into Our Wives Under the Sea. The collection is sort of slightly weird, kind of quiet, unsettling horror is how I would describe it. There's some stories that involve sort of body horror. There's one post-apocalyptic story, which I think is the final story in the book, which I thought was really, really good and quite harrowing. My favourite story was called The Great Awake, and in The Great Awake there's a epidemic or pandemic of sort of insomnia, and what happens is when people are unable to sleep, their sleep manifests itself as a being who will follow them around. So it's sort of in human form, but it's not, it's a sort of like a ghost-like human form, I think is how I imagined it. So what you have is you have people going about their daily lives, sort of zombie-like, because they cannot sleep, and they're all being shadowed by their sleeps. None of that's a spoiler because that's apparent like on the first page of the story. But I just think that concept's really, really interesting. I really like Julia Armfield's writing. She explores some really interesting stuff in here, and I think she might be a new favourite author. So that's my favourite book of January. So I am also in the middle of reading another short story collection, which is The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle. I've got a few stories left to read in this. I'm pretty sure I've read all these before. I can never remember with Sherlock Holmes which I've read and which I haven't, but most of these feel quite familiar, even though I can't remember the solutions as I'm reading them. But I think I have read this before, but I'm enjoying this. So in terms of my Read What You Own challenge, this is Sherlock Holmes' book 24 of the Read What You Own challenge, which I'll probably finish in the next sort of like week or two. I tend to like to read a couple of short stories between reading novels. And then book 25 of the Read What You Own challenge, so the final book of the challenge, is Enduring Love by Ian McEwan, which I'm going to be doing a buddy read with Nikki from Red Dot Reads. So I'll be starting this, I think, tomorrow as I'm filming this. We're going to take a couple of weeks to read this. So this is the final book of the challenge. So I'm counting the challenge as finished, even though I haven't finished these two books, okay? Because I'm going to be needing to read more books at the same time as reading those two books. So I went to the library this morning, and it was so exciting because I have been to the library for my book club, which is once a month. But when I've been going to that over the last couple of months, I've been like trying not to look too much at the shelves, so I get tempted to pick stuff up. But I went today. I came home with 8 books, 6 of which I had reserved and were there waiting for me. 2 I picked up from browsing the shelves, and then I have another 8 on hold as well. So I've gone a bit mad, but that's okay. I have really enjoyed doing the Read What You Own challenge. It's been good to get to some of these books that I've wanted to get to for a while, but it has been difficult to not, get any library books out. So my sort of plan how I'm going to do it going forward is to just try to make sure that I am reading some books from my shelves alongside reading library books. I am someone who is quite happy to be surrounded by lots of unread books. That's fine, it doesn't bother me. But I guess so long as those shelves are not sitting unread for like years and years. It's about balance, isn't it? So that is my plan. So thank you for watching. I hope you're well. Let me know if you've got any thoughts about any of those books that I have mentioned. Let me know what you've been reading. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Bye.